Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. It's all but official. Mel Tucker out as Michigan State's head coach. And that suddenly opens up the most attractive, the most appealing head coaching job that we see in college football, being the head coach of Michigan State. And I want to start out with that idea that Michigan State, I mean, it's obviously never great when you're having to hire a new head coach because that means things didn't work out. And that's certainly the case with Mel Tucker. That being said, Michigan State's in a good spot here in terms of you look at the head coaching jobs and the head coaching carousel in that cycle. A lot of the top programs, right? Auburn, Florida, LSU, all recently have hired a head coach. You look at the programs that you're going to be competing with to find your new head coach. I mean, not many top schools, right? Houston with Dana Holgerson probably out the door. Neil Brown maybe at West Virginia. Outside of those, I mean, Michigan State is really going to have the pick of the litter in terms of what head coach they want to hire. I want to talk about some head coaching candidates for Michigan State that I think would be good hires. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. The support that you guys have shown the boys really does mean a lot. I mean, over 9,000 subscribers. So if you do enjoy the content, you want to support the fellas, consider subscribing to the channel. But more importantly, and especially with this, I have about 9 candidates that I want to talk about. Would love to hear from you guys. If I left some names out that you think would be good ideas, if you completely disagree with me, let me know in the comment section. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. And without further ado, let's get into this. And I want to have that conversation of what kind of head coach do you want? I kind of split up my head coaching candidates into 2 different kind of pools, right? You have one, like the younger coach that's been an ace recruiter, probably a coordinator right now. Or do you want to go with the proven head coach that's won at the Power 5 FBS level, that kind of has that proven track record of winning culture, building a program? And those are the 2 kind of candidates that you have. One probably offers a little bit more stability, right? Hiring a proven head coach that's won a lot of football games. And then the other side, like massive high upside. And we're going to get into those kind of candidates. I want to start with the young, up and coming ace recruiters that have kind of that high upside, but maybe a little bit of a lower floor because they're not proven head coaches. And you got to start out with Brian Hartline, the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. My only knock with Brian Hartline is, I mean, doesn't really even call the plays there. He is purely an ace recruiter, but you can't knock. I mean, this is the guy that's been the best recruiter in the game for the last 3 years. You talk about talent acquisition. If you hire Brian Hartline, you immediately raise the ceiling of the talent that's going to be coming into Michigan State, not only at the high school level, but also in the transfer portal. And that, I mean, offers a guy like Brian Hartline a lot of ability to turn around this roster from a talent standpoint relatively quickly. Again, a little bit of a lower floor. He's never been a head coach. He's the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, but we all know Ryan Day is kind of coming up with the game plan and calling those plays at Ohio State. So not a play caller, never been a head coach. Those are the knocks. But in terms of talent acquisition, Brian Hartline, one of the best in the game. And then we're going to the Big Ten. And this is probably my favorite potential hire in terms of the young recruiters. Sharon Moore, the Michigan offensive coordinator, also the offensive line coach. You look at all the success Michigan's had, it's been on the offensive line and kind of building in the trenches. And Sharon Moore has been that guy for Michigan. And what makes me a little bit more optimistic about Sharon Moore is I think he kind of recruits where Michigan State wants to be as a program. Like that identity of that physical brand in the Big Ten. Sharon Moore has done a ton in terms of rebuilding and revamping that Michigan culture, especially on that offensive line. He's really, really good on the recruiting trail. He's a young head coach and has been around Jim Harbaugh, who's built that program up to where it should be. And also, I mean, that Michigan connection, he's used to recruiting that kind of area of the country. And when Jim Harbaugh was suspended, he has at least a little experience of being a head coach on game day. So I think that offers you maybe a little bit higher of a floor. I think Sharon Moore not getting talked enough about because Brian Hartline's the flashier one, finding the 5-star wide receivers. But you look at Sharon Moore's track record, not only in terms of recruiting, but developing these guys. I mean, Sharon Moore would be a phenomenal candidate, young guy, but I think a really good culture builder as well. The next young up-and-comer guy I want to talk about, Sean Lewis, 37 years old, the Colorado offensive coordinator right now. What's different about Sean Lewis, he has head coaching experience at Kent State. Now, wasn't that successful at Kent State. That being said, that Kent State program has never been successful. He was kind of he's given Kent State some of the best years that they've had as a football program. So somewhat successful as a head coach, but an elite offensive coordinator. You see what he's doing with this Colorado offense in terms of, I know Coach Prime is probably most responsible for getting that talent, but Sean Lewis is putting together a really, really prolific offense with some of those guys Coach Prime was able to get in that transfer portal. Sean Lewis has head coaching experience. I think he's a really, really good play caller and an offensive mastermind. That would be a really nice hire. And then the last one from that young recruiter bunch. And this is a guy that nobody talks about, right? People have been talking about Brian Hartline, Sharon Moore, Sean Lewis. Glenn Schumann, the defensive coordinator for Georgia, he's been with this program for a long time. He's learned from Kirby Smart in terms of what it takes to build a program up to what Georgia is right now. You look at on the recruiting trail, ace recruiter, right? Bringing in a ton of talent, but also from a developmental side. I mean, Georgia's putting out guys to the NFL draft specifically on that defensive side of the ball at a record level. Glenn Schumann kind of combines, one, the recruiting side of things, the player development side of things. Glenn Schumann also been around just the best program in the country for the last couple of years, I think would also be a nice hire. So all four of those guys we talked about, Brian Hartline, Sharon Moore, Sean Lewis, Glenn Schumann, kind of the young up and coming recruiter bunch that, again, limited experience, if any experience as being a head coach, but has been really successful on the recruiting trail, really successful in that player development standpoint. Now, the flip side, you go to the program builders, right? The guys who have won at their schools, have done more with their talent, more with less, if you want to say, right? Not necessarily ace recruiters in terms of bringing in talent, but doing a lot with those guys. This is probably where I'm leaning, especially with the situation Michigan State is surrounding. One, you go to Michigan State, you're going to be able to recruit some sort of talent, but getting a head coach that's a proven winner, I think is really, really important. And the first guy I want to talk about, this would be my number one choice. And I don't know if he'll pick up the phone, but if he does, I mean, I'm not going to say blank check, but pretty blank check. Going down to Kentucky, talking about Mark Stoops. I think that he's kind of hit his head against the ceiling of that Kentucky program. And as much as Mark Stoops has done a phenomenal job building this program to where it needs to be, I don't think that Kentucky program is getting up to that Alabama, Georgia, LSU kind of echelon. And so I think he's kind of maxed out this program at Kentucky, and it would be hard to pull him away. That being said, if they can get Mark Stoops interested, I think he would be a phenomenal hire, one of the most underrated head coaches in the business. And the other thing that you have to have an asterisk with Mark Stoops, where does Mark Stoops do his damage on the recruiting trail? That Ohio region, Youngstown, Ohio, he's beaten out teams like Michigan and Michigan State, four top prospects in the state of Ohio. He knows that region really well. I think he could help winning some of those key recruiting battles in the state of Ohio. You combine like elite program management, elite player development, elite culture that he's built in Kentucky. For me, Mark Stoops would be my favorite hire if you can get him to pick up the phone. Next one, you got to go to Mike Elko. What he's done with Duke the last couple of years, he's been around the block, elite defensive coordinator. He's turned around that Duke program so quickly, and he's made really, really good hires on both sides of the football. It's really hard to argue with what Mike Elko has done with this Duke program. I think he's got to be on that short list of coaches that if you can pull them away. I mean, Mike Elko, you can definitely offer him more money as a defensive coordinator. He would be a very, very nice hire for Michigan State. Next one I'm going to, and this one is tough. Lance Leipold, again, very similar to Mike Elko, absolutely turning around this program, done a really good job in the transfer portal, done a really good job hiring his coordinators. 60 years old. He's got this Kansas program absolutely humming right now. Does he want to take kind of you're not rebuilding at Michigan State, but you're definitely having to kind of pick up the pieces a little bit at 60 years old. Do you want a coach that maybe only has 10 years left at the most coming in? There's a question there, but in terms of building that program, you can't really argue with what Coach Leipold has done with Kansas. The next one I'm going to, back to the Big 12, Chris Klieman, another guy who's done a phenomenal job, really good coordinator hires as well. And all these guys, we talk about elite head coaches in terms of doing more with less talent, establishing that winning culture. All of these guys also have made phenomenal coordinator hires, which is such an underrated aspect of being a head coach, right? When you take that head coaching job, whether you're an elite play caller on the offense or defensive side of the ball, it is super important to make the correct hires around you. You look at Nick Saban, why he had so much success in the past and maybe not so much now. the coordinators, the coaches around the head coach. Right, Nick Saban had guys like Kirby Smart, Steve Sarkisian on his staff. That's why they were absolutely crushing college football. Now he's got time. You have to replace both his coordinators last year. He missed on those hires. I think what makes a head coach elite is making those coordinator hires. Chris Kleiman, Lance Leipold, Mark Stoops all have done a phenomenal job doing that. And so you hire a guy like this, you can maybe hire some elite recruiters around him and play callers around him. But when you have the right head man making the right hires, that's what matters the most. Last two I want to talk about, we're going out to the Pac-12. One, Jonathan Smith. He's done a phenomenal job with Oregon State. And then Jay Dickert at Washington State. And the why I want to talk about Jay Dickert a little bit is he has experience coming into a hairy situation, right? He was a coordinator under Nick Rolovich. Nick Rolovich gets fired from Washington State there for COVID compliance reasons kind of thing. Jay Dickert came in, did a masterclass job at kind of smoothing out the ship, took a year or two to kind of smooth it out, get it right. And you look at this year, I mean, this Washington State team is a legit top 20 team in the country. Those are kind of my list of guys that I think would be really good hires. A couple other names that I've been seeing, Pat Narduzzi, I think, is going to really struggle with this modern era of college football. Kind of an older head coach, done it a lot. I don't think he's adjusted to the NIL, to the transfer portal era. So I'm looking at guys who've also been able to use NIL, transfer portal to their advantage, right? Like a Dabo Swinney, as crazy as this might sound, I don't know if I'm Michigan State, I'm hiring Dabo Swinney, even if he wants the job, because you look at him, you probably do hire Dabo Swinney, if we're being clear. I mean, he's one of the best head coaches in the country, but that point remains. Those head coaches who've had a lot of success traditionally at the college football level, but don't seem to be adjusting with the times, that's probably a conversation that I'm probably trying to stay away from those head coaches, because I want a head coach that's shown they can use NIL and use the transfer portal effectively, because that is, at the end of the day, like, you need to be able to use that in this modern college football era. Guys like Pat Narduzzi, Dabo Swinney, you haven't really seen that from them. A couple other names that I've seen floated around, PJ Fleck at Minnesota. He has experience coaching in the state of Michigan. I don't think that's a good fit. I think I'm more of like a PJ Fleck might be a good fit at Minnesota, although they're getting off to a hairy start there. I don't see him he's kind of a rah-rah guy, kind of a little bit of a cornball, I think. I don't know if I love PJ Fleck as the hire. Tom Allen would probably be another one. He might get fired from Indiana anyways. That I see PJ Fleck kind of as a Tom Allen, where you catch some fire. Yeah, he's won some games, but can you sustain that? Can you continually get the players to buy into that culture that you're bringing? I don't think you're seeing that with PJ Fleck. I think you're going to see a down year from Minnesota. And I also think you're going to see a down year from Indiana. Those kind of head coaches that get really hot, but then fizzle out. I think that's kind of what you're seeing. So those are the list. Dave Clawson from Wake Forest would also be kind of a sneaky good hire. He's won a lot of games. There's some other coordinators out there that you like, but if Michigan State's going to the coordinator spot, like, you got to get the best of the best. Like Alex Atkins at Florida State, the offensive coordinator, I think he's done a good job. Is he the best of the best? No. Brian Harline, Sharon Moore, Sean Lewis, Glenn Schumann, those are the best of the best. If you're hiring from the coordinator level, the younger recruiter level, like, you got to get the best of the best. If you're going for that program culture builder, there's guys out there. Michigan State can pay him more. That's probably where I'm leaning. That being said, if they do hire Brian Harline, Sharon Moore, like, I'm going to be excited for that hire as well. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. We'd love to hear your takes in the comment section. Let me know your favorite hires for Michigan State, and we'll talk to y'all later.